King Charles meets the Prime Minister Liz Truss as final preparations continue for Queen Elizabeth's state funeral tomorrow. The King will host a reception at Buckingham Palace for hundreds of dignitaries and royals this evening. World leaders continue to arrive in the UK. US President Joe Biden landed last night. People hoping to travel to London to file past the coffin are advised not to set off because the queue is likely to be closed in the next few hours. Camilla, the Queen Consort, pays a personal tribute to Queen Elizabeth, saying she has been part of our lives forever.
She's got those wonderful blue eyes that when she smiles, they light up her whole face. I'll always remember that smile. That smile is unforgettable.
Good afternoon. King Charles has been meeting the Prime Minister Liz Truss at Buckingham Palace in the last hour as final preparations continue for Queen Elizabeth's state funeral tomorrow. He's also hosting a reception for hundreds of world leaders and royals this evening. Officials are now advising people thinking of joining the queue not to set off, with the line expected to close later this afternoon. Last night, the Queen's 8 grandchildren, led by Princes William and Harry, stood vigil around her coffin. It is the first time ever that the grandchildren of a monarch have taken part in the ceremony. The US President Joe Biden arrived yesterday as world leaders continue to arrive in London for tomorrow's funeral. Our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, reports.
The funeral may be tomorrow, but world leaders are gathering already. The US President Joe Biden and his wife touched down late last night, one of more than 500 foreign dignitaries assembling to pay their respects to a woman the world knew as the Queen. Today, Camilla, the Queen Consort, has paid her own tribute to the late monarch, telling a special BBC programme how the Queen established her role in a world dominated by men.
She has been part of our lives forever. I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there. It must have been so difficult for her being a solitary woman. There weren't women prime ministers or women presidents. She was the only one, so I think she carved her own role. I'll always remember that smile. That smile is unforgettable.
Last night, the Queen's 8 grandchildren held vigil around their grandmother's coffin, another historic innovation, all sharing the same space as the public filing past the catafalque, all mourning and remembering together. Today, world leaders will join the public too at Westminster Hall, paying their own respects on what is the last full day of the lying in state before the funeral tomorrow. Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's Prime Minister, who's already been to Westminster, told the BBC the relationship of her country would evolve after the death of the Queen. But
King Charles has visited New Zealand as many times. He's well known in New Zealand. He shares many passions and interests that New Zealanders do. And I think that means that that relationship already exists. It's a transition, but it's not a jarring transition for New Zealand.
many of the visiting VIPs have already signed a book of condolence at Lancaster House, and more are expected today. A steady file of the global great and the good, who later will attend a diplomatic gathering not seen for decades, a full state reception at Buckingham Palace, hosted by the King, who was welcomed by the crowds as he arrived there this morning. Earlier, Michael Martin, the Irish Taoiseach, was given a low-key welcome in Downing Street ahead of what's been dubbed an informal conversation with the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister of Australia, Your Majesty.
This weekend, the King has also met the new Australian Prime Minister, a Republican, who today gave the BBC his assessment of how far the new monarch should engage in public issues.
It's important that the sovereign stay distant from party political issues But from my perspective, what I said is that I'd be very comfortable with the King expressing views about the importance of climate change. It is about the very survival of our way of life.
But politics is for another day. At Windsor, the flowers left by the public are being arranged ahead of the funeral. And this evening at 8 o'clock, there'll be a national minute's silence. Another moment to pause and remember.
And James Landale is with me now. James, lots of world leaders in London. How much is this going to be a diplomatic event as well as the funeral for the Queen?
Well, many, many years ago, when Churchill died in 1965, the then Prime Minister Harold Wilson coined this phrase, a working funeral, when you can use the opportunity of all of these world leaders coming to the UK to send messages, to do a bit of diplomacy and engagement. And clearly there will be a bit of that. You know, the Prime Minister today has been meeting the King just in the last few minutes. You know, two people very much in the newness of in their new roles. But the Prime Minister and the King are also going to be meeting lots of those world leaders. The Prime Minister's already seen, as I said in my report, Michael Martin. She's also seeing the Canadian Prime Minister, also the Polish Prime Minister. So there's a lot of that going on. And the main focal point of the diplomacy will be tonight at the reception at Buckingham Palace, where the King and the Queen Consort are hosting all of these world leaders. It sounds like, you know, you're just saying it's a reception, a drinks party. Actually, it's an enormous event, the like of which we haven't seen for years. So there is diplomacy on the side, Ukraine, world economy, lots to talk about. But the ultimate point is that they're actually here for a very short period of time. And so the main focus will be on the Queen, because the moment the funeral is over tomorrow, most of these leaders are heading straight to the airport. Many of them are going to where the real diplomatic action is, which is a big UN summit in New York later this week.
Thank you, James. Well, if you'd like to watch more of the interview with the Queen Consort, Camilla's full tribute to the Queen will be broadcast in a special programme on BBC One tonight at 7 p.m. The Queen's lying in state will end at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Then at 10:44, the coffin will be moved from Westminster Hall a short distance away to Westminster Abbey, where her state funeral service will be held. The Royal Navy's state gun carriage, seen here rehearsing, will bear the coffin drawn by 142 sailors. Senior members of the royal family, including the King and his sons, Princes William and Prince Harry, will walk just behind in the procession. At 11 o'clock, the Queen's funeral, expected to be attended by 2,000 guests, will begin with the service led by the Very Reverend Dr. David Hoyle. We can go to our correspondent, Helena Wilkinson, who's at Buckingham Palace. Helena.
Well, Joanna, we saw the King being driven behind us in the last hour through the gates at Buckingham Palace. As you can see, lots of people here today from very, very early on this morning. They cheered as he entered the palace through the palace gates, and he waved as he passed by. A very busy day, as we've heard James mention there, for the King. The focus will be here at the palace later for that huge state reception that's been hosted by the King and also his wife Camilla, Queen Consort. After the reception, the guests will have the opportunity to sign the official Book of Condolence, and if they wish, they can go and see the Queen lying in state in Westminster Hall. And still, people are queuing in their thousands this lunchtime in central London, waiting to be able to be let in to go and pay their respects in the final hours before the Queen's funeral. Later on this evening at 8 o'clock, there will be a 1 minute's silence. That will be a national event, and it will be another poignant moment in a week of so many powerful, poignant moments for once again people to come together to remember, reflect, mourn the Queen, whose funeral takes place in central London tomorrow.
Thank you, Helena. Well, people hoping to join the queue to see Queen Elizabeth lying in state have been advised not to set off from home now if they haven't already done so. The line will shut at some point later today before the late Queen's coffin is moved to Westminster Abbey for her funeral tomorrow. And this is the scene right now. The queue still stretching for miles and the waiting time currently just over 13 hours. Our correspondent Lauren Moss is where people are joining the queue in Southwark Park. Lauren.
And this is the final point of entry, the last chance really for people to enter the queue to pay their respects to the Queen's coffin lying in state. And they've been arriving all day in their thousands. And like you said, people are being urged not to set off for the queue now if they haven't already done so, to avoid disappointment if the gates close and they can't get in. And like I said, this is the final entry point. People are setting off here, ready for a 10-mile walk that's ahead of them. I joined them first thing this morning.
They've been turning up in their thousands, morning, noon and night, to queue for the Queen. Another chilly start saw blankets handed out along with wristbands as mourners embarked on the 10-mile snaking journey across south-east London to the Palace of Westminster.
We really just want to be part of this incredible piece of history, to have those memories for the children.
And what do you both think about the long day you've got ahead of you? How are you prepared?
We need to keep up our stamina. But enjoy it in the sights later on.
On the fourth and final full day of the Queen lying in state, the warning of the wait ahead hasn't put people off making the trip.
I remember the Queen when I was a little girl and she came to Jamaica. All of us look up to the Queen, and I just want to go and say thanks.
We really wanted to be here, but my daughter's due a baby today and I'm a birthing partner. But if I'm not there, she was beaten by the Queen, and I think the Queen deserves that.
32 years in the Navy.
It's not just families who've got together. Fred Green is one of many who used to be in the armed forces and says he's come to pay his respects to Her Majesty for her lifetime of service.
Sad to see her go. I saw her come in, and I was only 6 when the King died, but I still remember the street party for her coronation. It's just amazing. Just happy to be here, really.
Yesterday, the accessible queue closed after all time slots were taken. Jill has long COVID. She says she wasn't able to get a space, and this will be the furthest she's walked in months.
What I'm really not looking forward to is the windy bit at the end, because that is really going to do my hip and my knees in. If somehow that could be bypassed as a straight line, that would be incredible, but at the moment it seems I've got to do the whole walk on a Zimmer frame.
At some point today, the last person to see the Queen lying in state will pass through the gates to this park. When the queue closes, these gates will shut to try and ensure that anyone who's entered the queue is able to reach Westminster Hall by 6:30 tomorrow morning.
For people living in south-east London, the last few days have been surreal. Joe set up a stall serving tea and coffee for weary travellers passing his door.
It's cold out here, so we're making nice teas and coffees. We're not tearing pulling the pants off of people, so to speak. We're just trying to earn a few quid and help the public.
This week has seen generations coming together from around the world. Wamogi moved to the UK from Uganda. He's missed church to be here today.
In my culture, if someone dies and they have grandchildren and great-grandchildren like the Queen does, we don't speak of them as the late. We speak of them as if they are present, because they are present in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Late morning, people were asked not to set off to join the queue to avoid disappointment. But for those in it, on their way to Westminster, there are still many miles to cover.
And for those who are about to start on that many-mile journey, they've stopped now to have a chat to me. We've got Sarah and 16-year-old daughter Liberty coming down from Milton Keynes. You've got into the queue. Decision's going to be made quite soon when to close the gates. Tell me, why have you decided to come on Sunday?
Well, we've been thinking about it on and off all week, and we just decided that today this is our last chance to come and show our respect, so we really wanted to come and make the effort to come.
It's worth the risk, you know, it's worth it.
Well, you're in now, so yeah. You've got the 10-mile walk, you've got your headphones there, you've got a hoodie. How else are you prepared for this trek?
We've been to Sainsbury's, quick meal deal. But yeah, took the train Oh, it's been stressful. I'm sweating to death, but it's completely worth it. Yeah, I'm so excited.
What will it mean to both of you to see the Queen's coffin lying in state at Westminster Hall when you get through?
I expect it to be really emotional, and that's why we've come, because we want to experience that once in a lifetime.
Yeah, there's no other chance, is there? No. After today, we're going to miss it, so it's a short price to pay for a long-term memory. I'm going to remember this forever, so.
Thank you both very much. I'll let you get on so you can go and collect your wristbands, and I'll move round to speak to Amanda and Paul, just joining the queue now. Where have you come from today?
Coventry.
Okay, so what time did you set off?
We set off about 8:30 this morning. Yeah, so panic that we weren't going to get here. We've been on 4 or 5 tube trains just to run down the road to try and get in the queue before they close.
And you might have 14-hour walk ahead of you.
We're happy. We've got chairs, we've got loads of food, we've got a flask of drinks, food. We're sorted.
And Paul, you have your medals there. Tell me about your service history and why that played such a part in you deciding to come down here today.
Well, I've always wanted to join the Army. I was a reserve chef, military chef in the Army for just under 16 years. I've served on operational tours. And for the Queen herself, she served in the Army during the Second World War. She's a veteran. She's one of us in the armed forces community. And it means so much that we got the opportunity to pay our respects, to say thank you for serving for Queen and country.
Do you think it'll be quite an emotional moment for you when you finally get inside there?
Definitely. She has been our boss all this time, you know, for the military. She's the only boss I know. You know, she is well respected. Same as the royal family as well, those who served. But she will always be our boss.
Thank you very much, Paul and Amanda. I'll let you continue on to join the back of the queue and collect your wristbands.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
So like I said, very shortly, I would imagine a decision is going to have to be made about when that cut-off point is going to come to close the gates, because the decision is that with all the stewards and everyone that's been working so hard to man this route, is to make sure that those who have entered the queue are able to snake their way on that 10-mile route from here to Westminster Hall when they're not turned away, because the lying in state does finish tomorrow morning at 6:30 before the Queen's funeral takes place.
Thank you, Lauren. In Northern Ireland, tributes have been paid to Queen Elizabeth across the traditional political divide. The late monarch played an important role in the peace process, making significant symbolic gestures to help reconciliation after 30 years of conflict. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page has been hearing from people ahead of the Queen's funeral.
In Northern Ireland, castles are a backdrop for condolences. The fresh flowers have brought back old memories of the Queen's trips across the Irish Sea.
Carrickfergus Castle looked out on a very wet scene as the royal barge brought the Queen to the jetty.
Some of the most precious recollections are of people meeting the late monarch.
I was so nervous, you know, and to think that I was going to meet the greatest person ever in my life, and went forward down to the wee platform, and you know, you did your curtsy, and then you're looking under these two beautiful blue eyes looking at you, and the smile.
Just 3 months ago, residents of the Fountain Estate in Londonderry held a party for the Platinum Jubilee. The picture of Her Majesty, which they made for that occasion, now has a black ribbon attached as people prepare themselves for her funeral.
I want to sit there and cry and you know, just really drink in every single second, as we have been doing. I mean, everybody at the minute here in this club, the minute they come in, the TV, and they're sitting glued, and you know, you find an hour passes, 2 hour passes, and you could just sit there all day.
It's almost 70 years since cameras captured this in Northern Ireland's capital. Thousands greeted the sovereign with joy during her coronation tour. But on the day of the funeral, this will be a place of sorrow rather than celebration. People will gather to watch proceedings in London and Windsor in front of a grand building which Queen Elizabeth II knew so well. Members of the Irish nationalist community ultimately want Northern Ireland to leave the United Kingdom. In these areas, fewer businesses are likely to close tomorrow. But while people don't feel connected to the monarchy, there's a recognition the Queen worked to heal a divided society.
There was a huge degree of respect for Queen Elizabeth, and people were very anxious to express their regrets and their condolences to King Charles. And there was a degree of warmth there, which might not necessarily have been present in the past.
And for those who cherish their unionist identity, the Queen was the prime symbol of Britishness. That sentiment is strong on the Shankle Road in Belfast.
It'll be a sad, sad day for such a lovely lady. She have served our country well.
Total honour. We take our hats off if we were wearing one for the years that she's given us, and we hope we can give something back for the future king.
The Queen was revered by Unionists and most often respected by nationalists. They'll both be contemplating her legacy as she's laid to rest. Chris Page, BBC News.
To other news, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says investigations into possible Russian war crimes are continuing in the city of Izium, which was recently retaken from Russian forces. Bodies are being exhumed from a mass grave on the edge of the city. Izium is one of several areas back in Ukrainian hands after significant territorial gains in recent days, although heavy fighting continues. Our correspondent Hugo Bachega is in Kyiv. Hugo.
Joanna, officials are determined to find out what happened to those people who've been buried in a pine forest outside Izium. More than 450 graves have been found, and one by one they're being reopened, the bodies are recovered and taken for examination. So far, 59 bodies have been exhumed, and the authorities say most of them are of civilians, but they also include 17 Ukrainian soldiers. We still don't know how they died, and this is likely to be a very long investigation. President Zelensky said there was new evidence that torture had been carried out by Russian forces, but he hasn't given details. Elsewhere in the Kharkiv region, a local official says Russian shelling killed 4 medical workers who were trying to evacuate patients from a mental health facility. We still don't know the details of what happened, but this alleged attack happened yesterday. There are reports of 5 civilians being killed in the eastern Donetsk region, and in the south, houses and power lines were hit in the city of Nikopol. This morning, the UK Defence Ministry said in its daily update that Russia had stepped up its attacks on civilian infrastructure as it faced setbacks on the front lines.
Thank you, Hugo. Police and community leaders in Leicester have called for calm after street clashes in the east of the city last night. 2 people were arrested after officers had to separate hundreds of mainly young men in 2 groups from Hindu and Muslim communities. It is the latest in a series of disturbances initially sparked by a cricket match between India and Pakistan late last month. 4 million people in Japan have been urged to leave their homes as the country prepares for one of the most destructive typhoons in years. Winds of more than 90 miles an hour have been battering the coast, and at least 25,000 properties are already without power. Our Tokyo correspondent Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reports.
Typhoon Nanmadol is a huge and angry storm, the like of which Japan has rarely, if ever, experienced before. It is hundreds of miles across, and close to its centre the winds are gusting to over 150 miles an hour. As it swept ashore this morning in southern Kyushu, the government issued an emergency alert, one which has never been declared before for anywhere on the Japanese mainland.
There's a chance we'll see winds of a kind that we haven't experienced before. We could also get big swells, storm surges and record rain.
Are only part of the threat. It is also carrying vast quantities of water, and that is now falling right across the eastern half of Kyushu. As much as half a metre of rain could fall in less than 24 hours. Kyushu is very mountainous, and the danger will then be of landslides and even more so of flooding. There is now just too much water coming down for the rivers to handle. And so the Japanese government has told nearly 3 million people they need to leave their homes and head to local evacuation centres. This morning, thousands began to heed that advice. But hundreds of thousands more will likely choose to ignore that advice and ride out the storm at home. It is going to be a very tense night for them and for the authorities. River levels across Kyushu and southern Honshu are expected to peak sometime in the next 12 hours, putting Japan's extensive flood defences under severe strain. All it will take is one breach and whole towns can be inundated in minutes, giving those who've refused to evacuate no time to escape. Japanese people are used to typhoons, and this country is well prepared. But as the global climate changes, these storms are getting bigger and more frequent, and defences that worked in the past may not be enough for monster storms like Nanmadol. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
Let's return now to reflections on the life and service of the Queen. Religion was a significant influence throughout the life of the Queen, and her funeral tomorrow is expected to reflect her deep and personal Christian faith. Our religion editor, Ali Makbul, has been looking at what the Queen's private faith meant to her and the role it played throughout her reign.
Throughout her reign, in good times and bad, the Queen drew heavily from her faith to guide her. And this little church on the edges of the Balmoral estate was a place she held dear. She came to services at Crathy Kirk all her life, with very little ceremony, though there was a royal seat on a royal pew where she always sat.
The Queen was a very regular churchgoer. If she was here, almost always would come to church.
For 15 years, Ken Mackenzie was domestic chaplain to the Queen. And he'll be among those at Windsor for her final service.
Some of the moments I would cherish most would be moments when the Queen would speak to me as a parish minister. I remember being over there one evening. So I asked her what her favourite hymn was. She said to me that her fondest memory ever of a Christian song was her father singing to her at her bedside as she was going to bed.
The hymn she remembered her father singing was based on the parable of the sheep lost in open country. Although the road be rough and steep, I go to the desert to find my sheep. Lord Sentamu, former Archbishop of York, is one of a small team that came up with the original order of service for the Queen's funeral. He says her knowledge of Scripture was remarkable.
She knows the Psalms by heart and can recite them. So you can be in a conversation. One time, she was going through quite a trying period. We've been talking, and suddenly, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Whence cometh my help? My help cometh from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And you knew, whatever difficulty she's going through, her anchor is in God.
And it was that anchor of her faith that once led the Queen to say this.
As dark as death can be, particularly for those suffering with grief, light and life are greater.
Aline Makbul, BBC News.
The Prince and Princess of Wales have played a significant part in this week of national mourning for the Queen. Their new roles make them increasingly important figures in the royal family, as our royal correspondent Daniela Ralph reports.
Days of duty, of honouring a grandmother and Queen, of supporting the new King, of representing the royal family. And at times, Prince William, now heir to the throne, watched his father closely, a clear view of what the future holds. The Prince and Princess of Wales, a new title and a new status within the royal family. Any changes to their life, officially and personally, won't be rushed. William takes over the vast Duchy of Cornwall estate from his father. Royal sources say the couple remain committed to the work they already do around mental health, the environment and supporting young families. They may pick up some of the King's previous charity work, but firm decisions are yet to be made.
We talk a lot about soft power, but I've witnessed that soft power in action. A word or two from a member of the royal family can mean a lot to you and also make you think. So they're determined to use that power for good, I would say. They realise how much responsibility they have, and they feel passionately about the citizens of this country and about making the lives of people in this country better.
Some areas will require careful navigation. There have been critical voices, but expect an early visit to Wales for the Prince and Princess, where we're told they will invest time in creating meaningful relationships. For William, there will also be a big focus on homelessness. There were hints of it earlier in the year when he was out in London selling the big issue.
He's going to be king, he's got a few houses, he's got a bit of money, but as much as he can, he wants to engage, he's trying to make positive change and he's trying to understand. He was there, he was present, you know, he wasn't ticking a box saying, I've done it now, I'm off for a dinner of foie gras. He was there in the moment trying to do something.
Taking on the title Princess of Wales, Catherine is said to respect the history of the role, but will create her own vision for it. Children and families will remain at the centre of her work.
You can see she spends time with children and our staff, and it's a really direct, personal, humane interest and a huge level of compassion and understanding. So on a personal level, you can see how it touches people's lives and changes them.
Over the summer, the Prince and Princess of Wales moved here to a house in the grounds of Windsor Castle. It's been a period of readjustment. They may eventually move into the main castle, but for now, their focus is on settling their family into a new routine. The Prince and Princess of Wales taking their 3 children to their new school. So much has changed in the 10 days since these pictures were filmed. They will all have an increasingly important role in the future popularity of the royal family. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Windsor.
As we've witnessed, there's been an outpouring of grief across the country. On the eve of Queen Elizabeth's funeral, our home editor Mark Easton reflects on the past 10 days of national mourning in the UK.
The certainties of a kingdom have been shaken, ruptured by the loss of its monarch and a key bridgehead to its past. Plans for these days have been in place for decades. Every feather and flag, every step and turn, choreographed in minute and meticulous detail. The last 10 days have been about 2 distinct events: the passing of a queen and the making of a king. The transfer of authority is designed as an illustration of national competence, Britain showing its people and the world that even at a time of flux, it knows what it's doing. There is purpose in the performance too, binding king and kingdom in the gold braid of reassuring custom. Questions over the future of the monarchy or the union are answered with ceremonial conviction, echoes from ancient mists, albeit that much of the pageantry is a reinvention from the last century. But the respectful public response is real. The loss of a much-loved and venerable queen, a reminder of our own transience. Pilgrimages to palaces, the reverential ritual of flowers and flames, a communion with the sacred.
The last time I saw her, I saw exactly the same cheerfulness and confidence in her eyes as I imagined I'd seen at the coronation. We shall see whether the thread's being cut. King Charles could, after all, take the thread and knot it in a royal knot and say, on we go. That's what I hope he will do.
We have seen hostilities put to one side, a temporary truce perhaps, but an opportunity for healing too. Planned strikes suspended, disputes and rivalries postponed, Fulham and Chelsea, Alloa and Falkirk, derbies for another day.
The detailed plans for the accession always emphasised how the new king must be seen not only surrounded by the elite and titled, but among the ordinary people.
His first public act as king was to step from his Rolls-Royce outside the palace railings to meet and touch the gathered crowds, content to be kissed on hand and cheek by those he did not know. But when the dust settles, normality will return with the trials of real life. In facing those challenges, the country may have been strengthened by a period of reflection, a rare moment to think about who we are and who we want to be. Mark Easton, BBC News.
Let's return to the thousands of people queuing to pay their respects on the final day of the Queen's lying in state at Westminster Hall. The queue is expected to reach capacity and close this afternoon. This is the scene right now. The queue still stretching for miles, with the waiting time currently around 13 hours. Our correspondent Charlotte Gallagher is near the front of the queue in Westminster, and we can join her now. Charlotte. Unfortunately, I don't think Charlotte can hear us, but as we watch, these are those who have already been queuing for many hours as they reach this point in the queue where it snakes, zigzags back and forth, and shortly after this they will cross the bridge, and that is when they reach the point where they will be able to enter Westminster Hall. And currently the message is that people who haven't already left their homes to join the queue should not do so, because we expect sometime in the coming hours that official announcement that the queue has been closed to any newcomers, because what they don't want to happen is for people to spend hours queuing only to be told that they cannot get in before the doors to Westminster Hall close at 6:30 in the morning. Charlotte, I think, can hear us now. Charlotte, over to you.
There is an army of people queuing up to get inside Westminster Hall to see the Queen lying in state and paying their respects. And there's also an army of volunteers here helping people along the way. You can see scouts at the moment. They're collecting food from people, which is going to be re-donated. I'm joined by two scouts here, Beth and Rishi. First of all, you guys have done an amazing job. Whatever time of day I've been here, scouts have been here, whether it's the middle of the night or first thing in the morning. How's it been for you, Beth?
We've been here 24 hours. We're on 8-hour rolling shifts throughout the day, so we are here 24 hours. It's been tiring, but it has been the most humbling experience and the most incredible experience, speaking to everybody that's here and understanding all of their different stories and the reasons why they're coming to see the Queen lying in state.
And Rishi, it was the Scouts' idea to get this food donated. It was going in the bin, wasn't it, until you guys thought, no, this needs to go out to people who need it?
Yeah, it was really sad actually when we first arrived and we saw that a lot of it was going to waste and it could be reused, and I think every single one of us wanted to do something with it, so we started distributing it back amongst other people in the queue, and then we thought, actually, all of this is going to waste, let's do something bigger. So our CEO worked really hard to actually get some contacts with the Felix Project, and we're now able to redonate all the food that we've collected that's non-perishable to that project.
That is just fabulous news. And Beth, you were saying the quantities of food that's going out to people who need it is incredible.
It's absolutely incredible. Just in the first 6 hours that we started collecting, we collected 40 big bags worth of food, and that has only increased since then. It is being picked up a couple of times a day, and with that we are absolutely filling the vans and making sure that people that are less fortunate and can't afford luxuries are still getting those.
And Rishi, are you going to get tomorrow off and you're going to get to sit down and watch the funeral?
I am, yes. It's been such a great experience, I think, meeting all these different people from all over the country and the world, and actually it would be nice to have a bit of time away, but actually I've made loads of friends with the Scouts who we've been working alongside, and hopefully we'll go together to watch the funeral.
Well done. Thank you so much. You guys have just been brilliant. They have worked so hard, and it's not just the Scouts, Joanna. There's been the Girl Guides, the Red Cross have been out, people from different churches, all volunteering to make sure people in the queue are as comfortable as they can be.
A real coming together. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Well, details have been released of how you can watch the Queen's funeral tomorrow. The service will be broadcast on television and radio by national broadcasters. There'll be special viewing places along the route of the funeral procession in London and Windsor. And there'll be big screens in city centres and 125 cinemas will be showing the funeral around the UK. Let's go back to our correspondent Helena Wilkinson, who's at Buckingham Palace. Helena.
Well, Joanna, we've seen so many extraordinary, powerful, poignant moments, haven't we? From the people we've just seen queuing, willing to queue for hours, many overnight, thousands and thousands of them queuing to see their Queen lying in state, to the Queen's grandchildren who held that silent vigil by their grandmother's coffin, to the journey that the Queen took from Balmoral to London. Now, as the final preparations get underway for the Queen's funeral tomorrow, presidents, prime ministers, members of royal family from Europe, they are all arriving here in the UK to pay their respects. It will be one of the biggest gatherings of royalty and politicians that the UK has hosted for decades. And tomorrow, across cities and towns in the UK, people who have so publicly mourned this week will be able to see the funeral on screens, in parks and in cinemas. The streets will once again be lined for an historic moment. After the funeral, the Queen's coffin will be taken to Windsor, a place that she regarded as her home, and she will be laid to rest next to her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. Before that, this evening, there will be a 1-minute national silence for people to once again pause, come together and remember. Joanna.
Thank you very much, Helena. Now, it's time for a look at the weather. Here's Elizabeth Rossini. Hi, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Joanna. Well, the flags are at half-mast here, but the sunshine continues across much of the Greater London area in particular, as you can see from our Weather Watcher picture here, just captured from Hampton Court, the Tudor chimneys there, lots of blue sky and sunshine, and there's plenty of sunny spells as well for much of the far southwest of England, so Devon, Cornwall, Wales as well, sunny skies here. You can see from the satellite picture where the cloud is, it's mostly across the northeast of the UK at the moment, and as we head through the rest of this afternoon, there could just be a few showers, certainly plenty of cloud for North Sea facing coasts, and there's still a brisk northwesterly wind blowing here, although it will ease down as we head through the rest of the afternoon. And here are the temperatures, generally in the mid-teens for most, between 15 and 18 degrees Celsius. A little cooler towards northern Scotland, but here there will also be some sunshine as we head through the rest of the day. Now, across central London for the rest of this afternoon for Her Majesty's lying in state, it will stay dry. There'll be some sunny spells, temperatures peaking at 18 degrees Celsius. So the sunshine largely continues, but we are expecting a lot more cloud for the Queen's funeral tomorrow. Now, as we head through tonight, then there will be generally a lot more cloud around. This cloud is really quite widespread, so we're looking at a milder night tonight than we saw last night. Some clear spells across northeast Scotland. Here, temperatures could dip back down to low single figures once more. Also, a bright start probably for parts of East Anglia, but there's a warm front just approaching western areas of Scotland into Northern Ireland, perhaps the Isle of Man throughout the day tomorrow. This is going to give some outbreaks of mostly light patchy rain and drizzle. It won't amount to very much at all. Into Wales as well, maybe a few spots of drizzle for London and for Windsor later on through the afternoon, but it won't amount to very much at all. And as we said, there'll also be some brighter spells developing here. Top temperatures generally in the mid to the high teens in Celsius once again. Now, there's lots of dry weather in the forecast as we head through the rest of the week, with high pressure largely dominating. We'll start to see some changes by the time we get to Thursday, with a more active weather front just sweeping its way southwards and eastwards. So keep an eye on the forecast. But this is Tuesday. It is looking dry. There'll be some outbreaks of light patchy rain and drizzle towards the far northwest, so parts of northwest Scotland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, plenty of cloud, but also some brighter spells, bit of sunshine creeping through, and with that warm front, some warmer feeling air as well. So temperatures generally in the high teens. Here's the outlook as we head through the rest of the week. Temperatures starting to creep up again on Wednesday, the high teens, perhaps the low 20s for parts of the south. And then as we go through Thursday and Friday, we'll start to see our weather front moving southwards and eastwards, so some more unsettled weather to follow. And then as we go into next weekend, then it will be feeling a little cooler with more of a northerly wind blowing once more. That's the forecast. Jan.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That is all from us this lunchtime. The next news on BBC One is at 5 o'clock. Hope you have a good afternoon.